Hi there and welcome to September's edition of the Rubycoin podcast, coming to you from the top floor of Rubycoin HQ here in Dublin, Ireland. With me this month is Emmet and Rory, and we're going to discuss in today's episode Elon Musk's busy month, Nike's controversial ad campaign, and Coca-Cola getting into the coffee industry again. One person that's been very busy since our last episode is Tesla CEO Elon Musk. In the last 5 weeks or so, he has stated that he's planning on taking Tesla private in a now infamous funding secured tweet, rolled back on that decision 2 weeks later, held a very emotional interview with the New York Times and then a much more relaxed interview on the Joe Rogan podcast. And to top it all off, he's not only doubled but tripled down on some pretty nasty claims against a British diver involved in the rescue of a Thai soccer team earlier in the summer. Outside of this, there's also been a string of high-profile departures from Tesla, with the chief accounting officer, the HR chief, and the vice president of worldwide finance all departing their posts recently. Emmet, do we still have faith in Elon Musk after all of this?
It's a good question. Excluding presidential candidates, I can't think of a single entrepreneur, business leader where stories are coming at us faster. So really with Elon, the thing that worries me is what's commonly known as the 2IC, or the second in command, who's usually the next person in line to lead a business in that person's absence. Like, for example, if I was hit by a SpaceX rocket, John Tyrrell would take my seat immediately and do a very fine job. And it's important that business owners are at least aware that the 2IC, or the second in command, is there and ready to roll in. Yeah. So with Elon, he seems like the wheel is definitely buckling on the metaphorical wagon. The man is under pressure. He seems to be overextended. What concerns me is he is a visionary, the likes of which you only see in every generation or so. But as much as he is that visionary, he's also the operations guy, and I think that is a really big problem. Like years ago, for example, when Apple was only a multiple of hundreds of billions in size, Fortune ran a cover story. The good old days. Fortune ran a cover story on Tim Cook long before the world in general was even aware that Jobs was unwell. And what struck me as a follower of Tesla is that I don't know who the 2IC is. As the same goes for SpaceX or the Boring Company and so on. Elon is the single face of all these businesses. And that worries me a little bit. Do I think he'll make it through the other side of, let's say, these episodes? I hope so. I'm still invested in the answer being yes. Yeah. I haven't contemplated selling my shares in Tesla, and I think it will work out, but I don't like what I'm seeing, and I don't agree with an awful lot of the things he's saying, but for now I'm holding my shares.
So Rory, do you think it would be a fair assessment to say that, as much of a visionary entrepreneur as Elon Musk is, the nitty-gritty of business life is starting to kind of wear him down a bit?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank him personally for loosening the rules on what can and cannot be done during a podcast recording. I think we're going to have a lot more fun going forward from now on.
It's getting a bit smoky now.
Under his leadership. Yeah, look, I don't know. And so just talking about the podcast, that was like 2.5 hours of recording in which some really important topics were discussed, including AI, the future of Tesla, the future of our carbon footprint, everything from the Boring Company to his new Neuralink AI program. And the only thing anyone wanted to talk about was those 10 seconds where he was smoking marijuana, legally, I might add. So yeah, look, I think he's just, if you want to get on the Tesla train, you've got to take Elon for what he is, and sometimes that's going to be a bit rambunctious, let's say.
So we're still big believers in Elon?
Yeah, I'm a big believer.
I'm a believer.
Another company that courted controversy over the past few weeks is Nike, who unveiled Colin Kaepernick as one of the faces of their new advertising campaign. Kaepernick has become a polarising figure in the US over the past few years after the NFL quarterback refused to stand during the national anthem before games in protest against police brutality and racial injustice. After announcing Kaepernick was part of the new campaign, many of those that were critical of his protest decided to boycott Nike products, with some even publicly burning them under the Just Burn It hashtag. Rory, was it a mistake for Nike to pick such a divisive figure for an advertising campaign?
Not at all. I think it was actually a genius marketing move by Nike. Us not being in America, we're kind of emotionally separated from this issue. I think we can kind of look at it from purely a business standpoint. If you think about kind of sports people through the ages, people really do like attach themselves to those who stand up for their convictions. You know, I think like about Muhammad Ali back in the 60s was hated because he refused to go and fight in Vietnam War. He's now seen as a very important figure and loved because of that. When you think about Nike as a business, you know, they made 35 billion in revenue last year. 20 billion of that came from overseas. So that's, I mean, I don't think that's going to be affected at all by this move.
Huge overseas market.
Of the 15 billion they make in the US, about 2/3 of that is from people under 35. So, you know, do they care about this issue, or what side of the debate are they on this issue? It's hard to tell. No one, you know, every poll that talks about the NFL standoff is kind of 50-50, and it's hard to kind of judge based on kind of your age and whether you're Democrat or Republican. But I really don't think they're risking a huge amount of revenue with this move. And think about how much attention this marketing campaign has got. Even the fact that we're talking about it now demonstrates that it's incredibly effective, and I think it's going to be a winner for them going forward.
I saw one Twitter user said that even though the products were being burned, it was just free advertising for Nike.
Yeah, of course, and those people have already bought the products. So.
Yeah. The only thing worse than being spoken about is not being spoken about.
True. Emmet, you're reading Shoe Dog at the moment, are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just finished it, and I have to say it's one of my all-time favourite books, not just business books, books in general. It's amazing how the co-founders of Nike are, for the most part, unknown, or at least not household names. Phil Knight, being one of the co-founders and the author of Shoe Dog, brings us from his early days in Oregon to bumping into Bill Gates and Warren Buffett at his local movie theatre. It's an incredibly authentic book. I enjoyed every chapter of it, and I have no doubt it's one I'm going to read again, most especially the last chapter where it's actually quite a moving piece of work, really, and in the last chapter he even credits Luck as having had a huge hand in Nike's fortunes. It's a fabulous book. Absolutely loved it.
In what way does he credit Luck in Nike's fortunes?
Well, when he talks about where he came from as a man who, when running was such a rare and a rare sport, when he was running in Oregon as a young man, he said that drivers would slow their car down and wind down the window and shout out kind of, I don't know what the American word is, but they just hurl abuse at the runner. And occasionally he said throw a soda can at the runner. Whereas it was that rare a thing, being someone who enjoyed running. And from those very early days where he went to Japan and climbed Mount Fuji and sourced a small local factory to start develop Blue Ribbon, as the business was once called, training shoes, sneakers, through to today, which is the multi-billion-dollar shoe behemoth or sports apparel behemoth. He says that, you know, hard work and thousands of good decisions, no doubt, were an element of the business's success, but luck was a very big part of it too. And that's very real. That's very authentic. Anybody who's done something that they succeeded in doing. I could list everything that I succeeded in doing in my life, and luck played a role in all of those things. And I just thought it was very sincere of him to actually credit luck in a large way to the successes of Nike, and I thought that made, you know, him personally and the story very authentic.
Yeah, you'll have to give us a deeper report for I Read a Book next month, maybe.
Maybe.
Some news closer to home now. Coca-Cola has been flashing the cash recently by snapping up the world's second largest coffee chain, Costa. The British-based Costa owns more than 4,000 outlets across markets as diverse as Britain, Europe and China. Rory, what do you make of these kind of recent diversification efforts from Coke? It's
a pretty standard story happening in the world of big sugar. Pepsi, obviously, are diversifying away from sugar as well into kind of salty snacks and SodaStream recently enough. What I found straight, you said they're diversified across Britain and Europe and China. Actually, about 85% of all their revenues come from Britain alone.
Okay.
So Costa were purchased for $5.1 billion, which is 3 times price to sales multiple and a 16 times price to EBITDA multiple, which pretty much puts it at the exact valuation of Starbucks, although Starbucks is obviously a much bigger company. So, you know, why didn't they just buy Starbucks? If they wanted to get into the coffee game,
dream, you may as well go big.
If they wanted to get in the coffee game, should have just bought Starbucks.
Absolutely.
No, seriously, though, obviously.
Do Starbucks do coffee? I've certainly bought drinks from Starbucks, but I didn't recognise it.
So yeah, I mean, I assume the play is that they're going to be able to build out Costa as a bigger brand using their kind of industry knowledge. They'll also be able to sell their own products in a new channel, and obviously, they just want to get away from sugar. people are drinking far less sugary drinks, a lot more water. Coca-Cola were in the coffee game briefly a few years ago when they bought a share of Keurig Green Mountain, which they then sold on to JAB Holdings. And it seems to be kind of a 3-4-way battle now between JAB, Starbucks, Coca-Cola and maybe Dunkin' for who's going to be the big coffee player. Starbucks obviously leading the charge at the moment, but we'll see how things pan out in the future.
It's funny at a very personal level. Sorry, James. I never drank a hot drink as a custom in my life till my late 20s or early 30s. I didn't drink coffee and I didn't drink tea. But I actually started to drink coffee because for me it was the viable social alternative to sugar drinks.
Yeah.
At that point during the day where you've decided you're not drinking alcohol, you're committed to not touching the stuff until 5 o'clock. This is true, before noon. But actually, it's funny that at a personal level, I went towards coffee because I didn't want to go to sugar, and I'm not saying I'm some kind of hot drinks prophet, but you heard it here first.
Would you have much faith in Costa Coffee though? There's a few outlets around here in Dublin. Are you a fan or?
No.
I think the pause says more than.
Yeah, not a fan.
Well, you were telling us a story about a guy whose tongue was insured.
Yeah, well, I was just kind of doing a bit of research before the podcast, and I found out this interesting fact that Costa actually have. They employ a guy called Gennaro Pelliccia. I've probably ruined that name, but they employ him as a coffee taster. They've actually got his tongue insured for £10 million with Lloyd's of London. After my past experiences with coffee, I would say he's vastly overpaid if he's the one choosing the coffee to go in.
10 million?
£10 million, yeah.
God, I should get my tongue insured.
To finish off then with the most recent news from the past few weeks, President Trump, who we all know is partial to sending the odd tweet or two, sent one tweet last month that piqued our interest in particular. In this tweet, he claimed that some of the business leaders he had spoken to recently had asked him to stop quarterly reporting and go to a 6-month system. Emmet, would you be a fan of, ending the quarterly report cycle and moving to a longer term system? I'd
be a huge fan of it. It's absolutely preposterous now. America's in good company when you look around the world at who reports on a quarterly basis, but quarterly reporting creates the wrong behaviours. There's no other way to put it. And for long-term investors, not a whole lot happens every 12 weeks, which is in fact every quarter. And what people do, and logically, because we're trying to make sense of information, is compare this quarter to the same quarter 1 year ago, which in its own sense, its own right, isn't very sensible. We buy businesses based on their long-term strategic outlook, and we buy and hold them. And as the most successful investors in the world will tell you, when they buy a quality business, they sit on it year in, year out and wait for its long-term strategy to play out. When you're getting information handed to you every 12 weeks by the CEO and his or her team, it creates a secondary dialogue in the investor's mind, just as daily news creates a secondary dialogue. When in fact the real dialogue is this business strategically out to grow, and can it do so? Yeah.
And President Trump hasn't been the only one calling for end of quarterly reporting recently. Rory, I think Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase have had something to say about it recently too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and me would both applaud the end of quarterly reports.
Would make our jobs a lot easier.
Make our jobs an awful lot easier. We could go on holidays more, have a bit more time to ourselves. But it's funny that this comes just a couple of months after Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon co-wrote an op-ed in, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, and just a quote from that was, they weren't actually asking for an end to quarterly reports. What they were ending for was an end to forward-looking guidance, which they claimed is doing exactly what Emmet said there, was making people think way too short-term. And they said, this is just a quote from it, though publicly owned companies account for only about 4,300 of America's 28 million businesses, they are responsible for a third of all private sector employment and half of all business capital spending. America's public companies drive job creation, opportunity and economic growth. So you can see them looking at it from a much more macroeconomic viewpoint, where they think this short-termism is actually harming the economy. And so, I'm with them for more long-termism in terms of how companies approach their quarterly reports.
If it's good enough for Warren Buffett, I suppose it's good enough for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So over the last few episodes of the Rubycoin podcast, we've started asking you to vote on the segments you'd like to kill or keep for the next episode. We're going to do the same again this month, and to start off, we're going back to our companies we never talk about section. This is where both Emmet and Rory pick a company from the Invest app that they feel doesn't get discussed or talked about as often as it should. Emmet, what company from the Invest app would you like to shine a little more light on today?
I'm going to go to the absolute very bottom of our scoreboard of 101 stocks, the worst performing stock we added to our 1% showroom, and that's GoPro.
Okay.
Will I do it now?
Go for it.
Now or when you cue me? So as we all know, GoPro is a mass market camera and supporting software maker, and their cameras, in my world, are special use case cameras. They're for snowboarding or vacation on holidays or scuba diving. They're for, you plan to wear your GoPro, whereas, everyone else has a phone. Everyone has a phone in their pocket. Everyone else has a camera in their pocket on their phone for those kind of daily occurrences.
Yeah.
So GoPro, on the 2nd of August, about a month and a bit ago, announced its second quarter financial results. And as we just discussed, we aren't big fans of quarterly results. And in that particular conference call, we learned that revenue was down 5% from a year ago, and that gross margin percentage dropped down to about 30.8% from about 36% a year ago. So margins on the products was in decline. And then the net loss on a GAAP basis dropped 22%. So they lost, in plain English, about 27 cents per share.
Okay.
So what's interesting about GoPro, not in a positive sense, is its trend. So in 2015, it sold 6.6 million units or devices. And every year it's declined since. So last year they sold 4.3 million devices. And the CEO, the founding CEO, Nick Woodman, who has done things in the past that were of questionable judgment, like buying a supergiant yacht at one of the company's worst points in performance history, was very optimistic on this call. And he spoke about spherical cameras, which are this VR-powered camera, or cameras that power the VR world. So if you have an Oculus by Rift owned by Facebook, the cameras that captured the 360-degree bubble in the majority are made by GoPro, and the specific camera in question is called a Fusion. So even with a limited distribution, he said, it has captured roughly 48% of the US market on a dollar basis. Now, when you bring this into real life, I don't know anyone who wants a spherical camera who's mentioned they missed an opportunity without one.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for me to feel excited by them saying they've about half the market share on a device that nobody in my circle has ever said they need or want.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it won't happen. It may yet happen. So what's interesting, I guess, is that the investors got excited about Woodman saying that GoPro would return to profitability in the second half of this year, which may or may not happen. But what we're seeing is a business that has repeatedly missed milestones, has product fails, mispricing mistakes, and devices that either didn't come to market or weren't really needed.
Yeah.
So I regret that we added GoPro to our showroom. But, we pick stocks, and we do so. And whenever we pick a stock, we've researched it thoroughly and we're looking for it to perform. Some won't perform, but we're long-term buy and hold investors here. Yeah. And if I had GoPro in my portfolio, which I don't, I'd stick with it.
Yeah.
It's less effort and stress than the alternative.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer as well as celebrating your wins, concentrating your energy on those stocks that have done well. And I've booked that in this instance by looking at the one that has not done well.
Yeah.
I acknowledge it, I regret it, and certainly I still think it has a role to play in the future. I think it's a great prospect to be bought out by one of the bigger players.
Yeah.
But frankly, GoPro at the moment doesn't get me super excited.
Yeah, interesting. Rory, for your company, we never talk about who have you picked? For
a little more of a positive slant on things. Emmet, thanks for reminding us of that. So the company there's a reason we don't talk about it. The company I've decided to talk about that we never talk about is a company called Blackline.
New edition. Recently new edition.
Recent edition, yeah. Blackline is a software as a service company which automates accounting processes for major enterprise customers.
Sounds fascinating.
Are you asleep yet? No, it's a real Peter Lynch boring stock, but the numbers are very exciting. They've got over 2,400 customers, including the likes of Coca-Cola, Under Armour, British Gas, Dow Chemical and eBay. It's got high gross margin business, about 77%, and minimal churn, because the processes that Blackline do, and there's many of them and they're quite boring, so I'm not going to get deep into them, but they're essential for their clients and they save their clients both time and money. It's got a visionary CEO, I believe, in Teresa Tucker, who is miles ahead of the industry in moving her business to the cloud. She did it years and years before the big hitters like Adobe started doing it. It's still a small company, only $3 billion. Very talented CEO at the helm, as already mentioned, and last quarter grew their top line 32%. We added it in April. Shares are up about 40% since, and I think it's still very early innings.
Yeah, I love the stock too. And I'm glad that you touched on the CEO and founder as a female. And Warren Buffett has repeatedly said that if you can invest in a trend, women is a trend to invest in, because for unfortunate reasons, for a lot of history, women were suppressed in business. And she's a visionary. She's executed on her vision. It's a wonderful business. It's a great stock. It's pretty boring, but I certainly think it's going to be a winner for long-term investors.
Cool. So that was the companies we never talk about section. The next section we're going to revisit is I read a book. This is where one of our investing team discuss a book they've read recently that helped them to think about investing or the world in general just a little differently. Emmet, in last month's expert opinion piece, you wrote about some of the lesser known parts of Alphabet's business. Continuing on in that vein, the book Rory's going to talk about this week is Everybody Lies by Seth Stevens. Rory, you can take it from there.
Yeah, I'm glad you tried to pronounce the name there, because I think his name's actually Seth Stevens Davidowitz. It's double-barreled.
Seth Stevens is easier.
Seth Stevens is easier. Yeah, this was a great book. The premise is very clever. The author argues that what we know about most people is derived from methods that actually induce people to lie. So if you think about surveys or kind of polls that people do, there's no incentive for people there to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And what they've actually found is even when it's anonymous, people end up lying about their behaviours, particularly embarrassing behaviours. And this is called social desirability bias.
Okay.
However, there is one place where people are actually very honest, and that's when they are searching for information online. So what the author did using anonymized data from Google Trends and Google AdWords was that he discovered some quite shocking things that people frequently lie about, and figured out what the truth is behind the matter. And now, a little disclaimer here: if you are of a sensitive disposition, this might be a book you want to pass on. The author pulls no punches when discussing topics like racism and sexual preferences, which is topics I won't dive into here. However, some of the findings that are discussed are quite interesting, like the fact that parents, when Googling information about their sons, are 2.5 times as likely to ask if their sons are gifted than if their daughters are gifted. And that's despite the fact that in American schools, girls are 9% more likely to be in gifted programs than their male counterparts.
Wow.
So can either of you fathom a guess what parents Google in relation to their daughters?
And that's some disparity. It's terrible. No, actually, the muses are not singing. I have no idea.
Parents Google most about their daughter's appearance. So parents ask questions like, is my daughter overweight? Roughly twice as often as they do regarding the sons, which again doesn't bear up to the facts, as more male children are overweight than female children. Another interesting insight was a comparison the author did between how people talk on social media versus what they're searching for on Google. And so for this, he looked at how women talk about their husbands. So on social media, the top terms that are used along with husbands are the best, amazing, and my best friend. However, what women are looking for on Google when talking about their husbands, the top 3 phrases are annoying, a jerk, and gay. So these are just some of the few insights gleaned from this information. Obviously, while I was reading it, all I could think about was how we could use this stuff for stock picking. Lo and behold, the last chapter of the book is essentially called Why This Won't Work for Stock Picking. So,
damn, what a waste of 13 years.
Despite that being a massive waste of time in that respect, I thought it was a really compelling read. Anyone who enjoyed Freakonomics or has an interest in the use of big data will definitely find it worthwhile.
Oh, sounds like a good one. I read years ago that Google had the ability to predict where flu is bubbling up by where people Google, sore arms and legs. And they have a predictor now that kind of has an early indicator. And you can imagine when that's multiplied across the, masses of data that exists.
Yeah, I'd heard that fact before. In fact, I think you told it to me, and I thought this book was basically just a bigger exploration of that idea.
Oh, right, yeah. And it's true, you entered the truth. Your truths go into Google. If you feel like Mexican food, you might not articulate it, but you Google where's a local Mexican place, and they are getting the truth, people's innermost concerns and thoughts and worries all the time. And that is actually some powerful place to sit.
Yeah, it seems like Pandora's box a bit, maybe.
Yeah.
We shouldn't open it.
Yeah.
So that was, I read a book, and the book again was Everybody Lies by Seth Stevens. The final segment we're moving on to now is Jargon Buster. So this is a relatively new segment where we take some of the most frequently asked questions we get in through the Invest and the Learn apps and kind of open them up a bit and kind of discuss them a little more. One of the things we've been asked about most frequently was market operating hours. Emmet, do you want to kind of discuss that a bit more? It might seem kind of like an obvious topic, but I think there's a lot of people
it's a
maybe...
good question.
And there's time differences as well,
Sure.
I think, which come into play with
Absolutely,
market
yeah.
operating hours.
This is true. So the two big stock exchanges in the United States are both in New York City, NASDAQ, and the New York Stock Exchange. They operate from 9:30 in the morning till 4 p.m. that afternoon, Monday to Friday. So wherever you sit in this world, you have to add or subtract hours to understand if the market is open at this time. As a general practice for retail investors, that's you and me and, you know, everyone else doing it themselves. I believe people should only buy stocks when the stock market is open.
Yeah.
And personally, I think after the market has been open for half an hour. So from 10 a.m. onwards, New York time, Monday to Friday, is the best time to buy shares. And the reason being is that generally out of hours trading occurs. You can buy shares out of hours, but the pricing mechanism and the liquidity of those shares is not as transparent as when the market is fully open.
And why is that? So we get a lot of questions from users, and rightly so. You know, you hear about after hours market and pre-market. So these are, you know, trading periods before the market is actually opened. But why are these kind of, I don't want to say riskier, but why are they?
You know, you've got big institutions who want to make plays right after an earnings report comes out.
Yeah.
It's very short-term thinking, in my view.
Yeah.
You know, you shouldn't be worried about a couple of percentage points here and there if you're investing for the long term.
Yeah.
Definitely. CEOs will generally make their announcements, as Rory said, after hours or out of hours rather. So it could be first thing in the morning or after 4:30 in the afternoon. So.
And just on the liquidity issue, you see, especially right after an earnings report comes out, a stock can go violently up or down, depending on the wording that is used in an earnings report. And a lot of this is done by actual algorithmic trading. So they see negative language in an earnings report and sell instantly.
Yeah.
But, you know, over the next half an hour or even the next trading day, the stock tends to stabilize around a more reasonable level.
A nice exercise for our listeners is to go into Yahoo Finance, everyone's favourite search engine for stocks, and look at the 5-day graph of a few stocks. And the smaller the stock, the more pronounced the out of hours effect is, because strictly the line should be joined up, one straight line.
Yeah.
But when you look at the 5-day graph of a stock, you can see the closing price the day before and the opening price the next day are very often not stuck together because something happened out of hours, especially a quarterly earnings season, as Rory said. So go to Yahoo Finance, look at 5-day graph, stick in a few names of companies you know, and you will see times where the closing and opening prices don't match each other. And that's what we really want to avoid as long-term investors.
One industry we get a lot of questions about is the cannabis industry. Rory, what do you think?
So yeah, I've had a bit of fun with this question. A friend of mine who lives in California this week sent me a message about stock that she owns in the medical cannabis space called Tilray. The ticker symbol is TLRY. I had a look into it. Tilray engages in the research, cultivation, processing and distribution of medical cannabis. It's up threefold over the last 12 months and has a market cap of over $10 billion. And that's off revenue in the trailing 12 months of $28 million. So I'm just going to try and put this in perspective for people. If you were to look at a premium software as a service company like Viva Systems, they trade at a price to sales multiple of 20. That's pretty high, but as we've discussed here and in the Invest app, there's a lot of reasons that we think Viva deserves that premium valuation. Tilray, as it stands, trades at a price to sales multiple of 361.
Wow.
So, look, I don't know what investors are expecting to happen over the next few years, but I think they're being a bit optimistic if they think that company is going to grow into a valuation like that. It's obviously an industry with a lot of hype, but I would caution investors to remember that, you know, this is a plant that can grow anywhere, in anyone's back garden or in their houses. If you're looking to invest in it, rather than a small company like this, I'd say a safer play would be something like Constellation Brands. They're the company that owns the Corona beer brand, and they also own 38% of a company called Canopy Growth Corporation, which is a larger and kind of more established medical marijuana company.
The final question we have this month in Jargon Busters isn't really jargon, I suppose, but we had a user, Emmet, asking about where we got the name Rubicoin from.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is that most people in their life will have the joy of naming a person, or a lot of people will. And when you're naming a baby, you'll generally go with something that someone else has heard. So it's, and normalized in your town or in your country, it's a name people know and can pronounce. And when you pick a business name, you're trying to find something that's unique and identifiable. When John Tyrrell and I sat down, we were aware of, we wanted something that was quirky and memorable. Cryptocurrencies didn't exist at the time, so altcoin, Litecoin, Bitcoin and friends were not around when we named this business 4 years ago. So Rubycoin is a derivative of a Rubik's Cube name, and coin as a currency, and it was a play on words to say that the ability to manage your financial futures analogous to solving a Rubik's Cube, which for most people, if you're handed a scrambled Rubik's Cube, is quite difficult to solve. However, if you know a sequence of turns based on what you see, you can solve a Rubik's Cube, as most people saw on TV back in the 80s. If they were alive back then, there was a craze to solve Rubik's Cubes in a couple of seconds flat. And that was down to people who had learned a sequence of turns and moves. So the play on words we went for was that our business and your investing life is like a Rubik's Cube, and it is solvable once you know the correct turns and sequences, and that's what we've codified into our products. So the coin piece is really just a play on the currency word, and hence the word Rubycoin.
Okay, interesting.
And on that note, if you were going to name Rubycoin, what name would you give it if it didn't have a name? Reply to us on Twitter. We'd love to see if we like it. We'll think of some way of rewarding our
it would be interesting.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to hear. I mean, because it's not as easy as it might sound. Naming a company.
Yeah. Cool. So
Consolidated Stock Pickers and Co. Industrial Consolidated Stock Pickers.
Rolls off the tongue.
I'm going to vote for Rorycoin.
Rorycoin.
Exactly.
We're running out of time in this month's episode, but I just want to quickly get to our elevator pitches. So this is where Rory, both you and Emmet, give me and usually Maeve, who's not here this month, a quick 30-second pitch on a company you're looking at the moment that might be in the Invest app or might not, under a proposed topic. So the topic this month is companies that have recently listed on the stock exchange. Rory, I'll go to you first.
Okay.
Give me your 30-second pitch.
30 seconds. Okay, so the company I'm looking at the moment is Stitch Fix, a recently IPO'd company that is in the online subscription and personal shopping services. They use AI to send a package of clothing, which they call fixes, to their customers, and then the customers are able to try on the clothing, decide what they want, and decide what to send back. And they've got 2.7 million active clients at the moment, up 30% year over year. They've got a female CEO, Emmet, you'll like that one. Net revenues are up 29%, and wait for this, for a recently IPO'd company, they have something we don't often see: actual profits.
What?
Yeah, not much now, but they are actually profitable. So that's my pitch.
Right, so that was Stitch Fix. What's the ticker symbol for Stitch Fix?
It's SFIX.
SFIX. Okay, so Emmet, timer's on, and this one I'm going to be really strict.
Okay.
The company you are pitching is?
Veoneer. Its ticker is VNE, and it's a spin-off from Swedish company Autoliv, who are the global leader in passive safety equipment for cars like airbags and steering wheels. So Veoneer is a leader in the active safety market. So in other words, automotive radars, cameras, driver assist systems, night vision systems, positioning systems, and they're also a market leader in restraint control systems, and a very ambitious niche player in brake control systems. And it's a very interesting business, very future relevant. It's a spin-off from Autoliv. Like it a lot.
So that company name again is?
Veoneer.
And this ticker symbol is?
VNE.
Perfect. Cool. I think it would be unfair for me to pick between the two of you this month.
Go on.
I like the sound of Veoneer.
Sorry, Rory. Rigged.
So that was our elevator pitches. And with that, that's the end of this month's episode. But as in the last few months' episode, we want your help in deciding which parts to kill, which parts to keep from today's episode. If you go to the Rubycoin Twitter page now, you can vote on the 3 sections. That's companies we never talk about, I read a book, and Jargon Busters, to let us know if you'd like to hear it again next month. If you miss out on the Twitter poll, you can still let us know what you think. You can get in touch with us on Twitter or Facebook, leave a comment on the podcast episode itself, message us through either the Learn or the Invest app, or email us at pod@rubicoin.com. That's pod@rubicoin.com to let us know what you think. If you have any suggestions for completely brand new sections either, or any topics you'd like us to discuss, let us know too. That's about it from us this month. As always, there's plenty of new things to check out in the Invest app at the moment. We have a new star stock and stock of the month as usual, and I believe the new expert opinion piece is coming this week too, so make sure to check that out. Thanks for listening in, and please make sure to rate, review and share the podcast if you enjoyed today's episode. From myself, from Rory and from Emmet, happy investing.